Welcome to the technical working group call for Thursday, the 13th of January, 2022. The topic for this call is going to be broadly described dependent accounts, how groups of accounts are handled on broker and booking systems. This will largely be led by Nick Evans. However, before we start the call, I'd just like to go around all of you in the order you appear on my screen and ask you to introduce yourselves. So starting with myself, I am Tim Hill of the Open Data Institute and program lead for the OpenActive initiative. Over to you, Andrew.
Andrew Marshall, Principal Architect at Gladstone.
Other Tim Corby.
I am the engagement consultant working on OpenActive initiative for the ODI.
Nathan.
I'm Nathan Saltra. I'm the lead developer at Playfinder and BookTech.
Matt.
Matthew Davies, Sports League and Venue Management Software.
Debbie.
Debbie Giordano, Everyone Active.
And finally, Nick.
Hello, Nick from Iman.
Okay, thank you all very much. I will start sharing my screen. However, this is going to be a largely audio kind of call. Let me just bring this up for you here. So yeah, this is the agenda for the call, but the agenda is largely determined by two items outstanding from the previous call, and this is really about dependent accounts. This is a little bit of a misnomer because it's really just describing the most common use case, which would be parents who have got a child that they control the account of. However, it's actually a wider issue than that. It's really about how groups of accounts are associated together and who is authorized to make bookings for other people. We'd hope to have this written up as an extensive GitHub issue for this call. However, I think unpicking some of the complexities of that has proved challenging. We've got a couple of options identified for moving forward with this. And so without further ado, I will ask Nick, who's been looking at this very closely, to walk us through that. Oh, sorry, I'll just pause for one moment. So we've got somebody else joining the call. Mark, do you mind just introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Mark. I'm Mark. I'm head of infrastructure here at Gladstone. So Andrew's asked me to jump in on the call.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks. Thank you for joining. So yeah, I'll hand over to Nick then to take us through some of the options for how we deal with dependent accounts, and we'd be very interested to hear feedback from Mark and Andrew about how that will relate to Gladstone systems. So over to you, Nick.
That's great. Thanks, Tim. Hello, everyone. As Tim said, I was hoping to have written something a little bit better than what I'm going to share with you, which is some scrappy notes. And the reason for that is that I was hoping to come with a really concrete solution, but unfortunately what I've got is actually, Tim, would you mind, sorry, resharing your screen and jumping down to the Appendix H in the document I just added? That would be, sorry, thank you. And that I will just talk to a solution that I've got to so far, having got this far and I was about to write it up, I realized that there were actually some problems with it. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to kind of quickly talk about this rough thing that I can explain, hopefully quite succinctly. And then maybe after that, we can talk about what other options there are. That's right, yeah. So to remind everyone of where we are with this in terms of the two different options we landed on last time, and I guess for context for everyone else, we're talking about dependent accounts of a primary account. So the primary account is the account that's connected through OAuth to the broker. Broker has an API key they can use to access the primary account. That's all fine. Challenge comes when we have kids that can't log in, or anyone, in fact, that can't log in, that can't authenticate themselves. How do we deal with that scenario? And this is this idea of a dependent account where the account of the child exists, and that child can make bookings and have an access pass to walk into a site with a barcode, etc. So the account is every way that it has all the same functionality as a full-blown account does. It's just that the management of that account is different. So with an ordinary account, you can authenticate to that account directly, and you can make changes to it, edit your name, etc. With a dependent account, it's someone else doing that on your behalf. So, the parent of the child or whatever the scenario is. And so starting with this problem, we've got another problem which we can call booking on behalf of, which is a slightly different challenge, but just talking specifically on the issue of dependent accounts, which is how the account of the child can be created and managed and maintained within the life cycle of everything else that's going on. It seems like there's two solutions to this that have come through the conversations we've had to date, at least. One is to link that dependent account to a parent. Seems straightforward. So if you've logged into a broker, created a dependent account, and you go and log into a different broker, you can see that dependent account in that broker via the login that you have, right? As a parent, that child account is available on both brokers, and you can administer that account. You can edit its name, whatever that looks like. Potentially even log into the booking system itself and edit the details of the child account if that's supported. So that's the first option. And the advantage of that is that if you create the child account on the whichever system through a broker, if you create a child account in one place, that child account will be the same child account that is available in the other broker or anywhere else. So you've got access to it. There's a little bit of complexity around multiple parents and things like that, but that's broadly option one. Option two is that we don't have an ability to share the child account across brokers. So rather than trying to do this synchronization thing where if you log in, you get presented with a screen that says, I've just found, we used little Johnny last time as our example of a child, but I've just found little Johnny. The broker might say, your account has little Johnny on it. Do you want to link this to another account that you might have for a different system? So, linking little Johnny between systems. That's the complexity that option one has. Option two, you don't have that because the broker just creates the account and it's for the broker specifically that little Johnny exists. So little Johnny is broker specific in option two. So hopefully I've articulated those two kind of clearly to start with. Option one being that the child account lives with the parent and is associated with and is accessed by the parent. Option two being that the child account just exists separately and is only accessed via the broker. Before going on to discussing both of those options, does everyone understand those two? Does that make sense?
How are you dealing with the GDPR element of the little Johnny's data with this?
So if the parent has created the data for little Johnny in both cases, I suppose it's the assumption is that the person who's a guardian has given permission to enter that data in the same way as they would if they went into the leisure centre and gave the kids details over the front desk. Is that what you mean, or?
Sort of. It's what I'm just trying to get my head around is, you know, they've gone into Centre. They, you know, I put it in my own circumstances. If I go into the Centre and sign up my daughter, I probably don't realise, and I wouldn't want my daughter's details going out on an open endpoint. That means that someone in Nottingham who's decided to sign up for the OpenActive Institute and is hooked up to a customer that's using it can now access that data.
Sorry, so right, stepping back a second, the wider context here is that all data of the primary account and dependents is being accessed via explicit consent from the owner of the account. So there's a kind of OAuth 2 flow that you go through that says, I give permission for MCR Active or whatever the broker name is, for broker X to use my personal data for the following reasons. And then bullet points, you know, to make bookings, to update my details, to access my dependents would be one of those bullet points.
So in our world, obviously you can link yourself to another member. So you are, and you can book on that member's behalf, but that member has their own consent settings. So if I go and sign up to, in this case, the MCR portal and go, oh, and it goes, oh, well, I found you got 3 linked members. That link itself has their own GDPR preferences that I don't have control over. Does that make sense?
GDPR from a marketing perspective, sorry, or from
well, GDPR, but also, you know, if I'm linked to a friend of mine and my friend goes up and signs into MCR, I haven't given him consent to link me in the MCR portal as such, even though I know what you're saying, you know, they've authenticated with the Gladstone database in this point and the link is there. I'm concerned on where the permission is being given for my details to also go out, even though I've given my permission to be linked in Gladstone because I'm also a member of Gladstone or whatever the customer is using the Gladstone database. But I haven't given my permission to be imported into the MCR system.
So in this situation, this is only dependents who have been, well, I see what you mean about it the other direction. I suppose this is only dependents who don't have an account themselves, as in they don't have an ability to sign in. So, you know, a 4-year-old child, for example, or 2-year-old child doesn't have an email address to sign in. Oh, although they might well have an email address these days, but
yeah, I mean, they probably will in these days. But especially with the way that our database works, everyone will have a membership record, and theoretically, even though you were 4, you would have a set of login credentials.
Sure, absolutely. But from a broker perspective, the need to create login credentials per child, I guess, is a maybe that's a Gladstone specific challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So from a broker perspective, having a mechanism that child can be created without having to kind of create those, I was going to say fictitious, but do you know what I mean? Create those login details that may not be, I mean, the child doesn't have their own email and password necessarily, so it's the parent really creating that detail on their behalf and using it, and therefore at that point it's really the parent's credentials.
Okay, so then we go. Let's maybe try and work this out in a similar way. So in the MCR thing, you've also got the Westminster contract, and you've got the sort of the other. I can't remember who else you're integrating with on this one. Let's use Legends as an example. Yeah, they've got a customer in there with little Johnny. They also want to book somewhere at the Everyone Active site. The Everyone Active site has the primary member in it. So what you're saying there is that little Johnny doesn't need an account. How does little Johnny make the booking in the Everyone Active database in this sense?
He does. So this is about creating the account for little Johnny. So how does little Johnny diagram might be helpful, mightn't it? Yeah, how does little Johnny's account get created so that we can make bookings for that user?
Right. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to work flow through in my head on. Mm-hmm. So if I revoke my permissions So if I walk into an everyone active center at this point and go, you know, no, little Johnny doesn't want me to make bookings on his behalf. You know, he's reached the age of 5 and he's decided that, you know, he has his own mind. I think it's the age of 2.5 at this particular point, but they've decided at this point they have their own mind. They want to make their own bookings. How does that reflect? Are you syncing up the changes? Are you sending all that revoke of consent to make bookings on that person's behalf? Is that going off to all the other systems that are integrated with this?
So there's a good question about that that child separating itself from the parent that might well happen at some point in the future, and whether we allow for that to be possible. I've got a suggestion for that as an approach that could work in the first option here. So yeah, exactly that. It could be that that separation happens, and then what happens there is that Johnny disappears from the credential, from the primary credential, right? So the primary person can no longer access little Johnny, and therefore on the broker side, little Johnny's no longer part of that account. They've disappeared, so they need to re-authenticate at that point to connect Johnny again. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just working out how you would sync up all connected parties to make that happen.
Well, I suppose the thing to think about here is that there is a separate, the Johnny exists, the MCR version of Johnny, or the broker side version of Johnny, is different to the Johnny that exists in each system. So in terms of synchronizing that, it's a case of because all the systems are different, it's going to be difficult to for those links to propagate up and down, I guess.
So if it exists in the MCR system, but and you're doing a sort of if exists creation step in all connected parties, how would you stop the duplication of data without holding it?
So because it's based on the dependent. So sorry, it's because it's based on the primary. So because the primary can access the dependent record, the dependent record's presented to the broker, to the user who's using the broker. So you know, let's imagine you've logged into MCR and it says, Mark, I can see that your daughter is you've got an account for, you know, whoever, and therefore do you want to create an account in MCR for this person? And then, you know, that account's created. If at a later point that account was to be, you know, become an adult and go on to do whatever, wanting to be separate, then that's I guess the suggestion that you would at that point see in the broker side. It would say, you know, this child's no longer connected to the account. Do you want to also re-authenticate it? Sorry, I'm not explaining it very well. The other part of this that's important to understand, I suppose, is that the brokers will have their own models for how families connect together. So in MCR, it's like a family record that has all the kids on the same record. And so in that example, MCR would probably just prompt and say, do you want to re-authenticate Johnny? Because Johnny is no longer part of the primary account. And then you have to type in username and password to that person.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, so if they did re-authenticate and go, yep, I want little Johnny on my account again, because he's decided he's reached age 6 and he's decided actually, no, he does need parental help. I'm just trying to work out how you'd stop the duplication of data, because if they've unlinked themselves, how do you know, unless you're storing all connected parties unique identifier for that record, how do you stop the re-authentication, say, well, go and add little Johnny to this person's account, please, via this post method? How do you stop adding little Johnny's data twice into the...
Yes, good point. Well, there's nothing, I mean, if the person that, if the MCR user doesn't, that's true. That is one issue with having two ways of kind of creating accounts. Obviously they could just create Johnny again as another dependent account, or they could link Johnny knowing that there's now a username and password for that account. Because Johnny doesn't have an email address, there's no way of being sure that there's a duplicate being created. There's no unique identifier unless we did some kind of rough match on, date of birth and name, and then said, by the way, you sure this isn't a record? But it does, yeah, it would need some amount of explanation to the user to understand.
Yeah, it would need to do a duplication check. Can you not use the duplication check endpoint that you had? I can't remember where else. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but there's that duplication endpoint that you had.
Yeah, it's based off email address, unfortunately. That one. Which is fine, because that's obviously a unique identifier for most people. For kids, that's not as useful.
Most parents use their kids. Most parents use their email address as the email for kids. But that's what we tend to find with everybody that signs up. Now it ends up becoming not the unique identifier, which is the second part of that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Very Gladstone specific, mind, because some of the systems have a unique constraint on the in the email address. So that's a good challenge though. I suppose broadly, does the approach, I guess, make sense to have a dependent that's linked to the primary in terms of a way that you can access that child's record via the account that you're connected to, which is the primary account?
Well, it's a common user case. I don't know how everyone else does dependent records. So I can only answer it from a Gladstone point of view.
Yeah.
I mean, even from a Gladstone perspective, currently you can't log in as a parent and modify the details of a dependent in any way. So that's what you were saying. There's currently no way to do that.
That's a limitation that exists.
I'm wrong, but
No, you're not wrong. That is correct.
Nick, can I ask a question about the difference between options 1 and 2 in terms of the creation of the dependent accounts? We were talking last week about the fact that perhaps we didn't even need to create a dependent account at the booking systems, that the broker was. Is that not what option 2 is? In both options, we're talking about actually creating accounts at the booking system as well, as opposed to last week we were talking about, okay, well, the brokers can just have their own concept of family or dependent accounts, and then when you're booking, the attendee might have the details of a dependent account which exists at the broker but doesn't really exist in the booking system, which I think would probably clear up some of the GDPR issues, because then there's no kind of flow of data from somebody who isn't actually the person backwards and forwards. But is that not the case? Is option 2 now we're also creating the data at the other end, because then there definitely would be the risk of duplicating it from each broker, I guess.
Yeah. So the issue with I think we kind of came to this at the very end of the call, but we do need to have an account for the child just so they can get a barcode to walk into the center. I think we thought for a minute that we might not need that, because if they didn't need to have a barcode,
right.
Then
okay, well that's fine. So if that is a definite requirement, then fine. Then I guess we do need to find solutions to these quite complicated issues of GDPR and data duplication and all sorts of things. I mean, I think from a GDPR perspective, I think it might be a little bit simpler than we're thinking here, because I don't think once the child reaches an age where they have their own email address or where they have their own ability to control their own data, it then becomes a case that the parent would be inviting that account to allow access, right? It's not that at that point, it wouldn't be that the broker says, oh, you've got this child, do you want to link them? And it just says, yeah, sure, go ahead. It's like you said, they would have to log in with the dependent account, would have to give permission by logging in and saying, yes, I consent to allowing my data to be seen by this other account who has requested that they be allowed to see my data and book on my behalf. So I think there are ways around that, but yeah, I do still think there's going to be issues with data duplication if each broker is potentially creating a child account in the booking system.
Yeah, that's right. I think that is it. I think the duplication issue we probably got either way. Well, yeah, it seems like it's a choice between two different types of data duplication issues, because the data duplication is either coming from the broker, the different brokers creating the same child, or the same user creating the same child because they don't realize they've already got an account that they can link into. Right? Is that what you're saying?
I'm thinking more of the flow from broker to booking system as opposed to, because I mean, realistically, the most common use case here we're talking about is parents creating the children, or parents wanting to get access to the child account, which has already been created in the booking system on the broker side. In the latter case, I guess each booking system could have their own version of the child. I don't know. It's all very complicated, and I feel like it's pretty like this is a really nuggety issue, but how much value is there in going to the nth degree on this in many respects? Or to put it even more bluntly, how absolutely required is this for MCR Active and Westminster in terms of, like, is this something that they're banging on the door and saying this happens all the time and we absolutely have to have this, or is this, or, and by the way, and if they're saying that, where is the proven data to show that? And if they haven't proven that, I would be inclined to say, can you please show me the fact that you're right 25% of the time, because I bet they wouldn't be able to.
Stephen Winfield, if he was on the call, I think would have the best answer to that. It's the junior walk-in case is the key. For kids at half term, they've all got cards. They all just run and go swimming. That's the thing that we wouldn't be able to support without a mechanism to provision that child as a booking system account, and then assign that child a barcode. So it really is about how do we provision the child, I suppose, and
absolutely. But how important is it to have to be able to do that through the broker? Is the next question to that. I mean, there's a mechanism to do that exists already.
Yeah,
what's the benefit?
From both organizations, it's a showstopper, because if they can't offer that service, then people are going to have to go and log into the booking system themselves and do that. And that's the duality they don't want for their pay and play members. They don't want to have to force people to go and log into the booking system to do some operations and then be in the broker for other operations and create that kind of split journey for their residents. That's where that came from as a requirement.
Shame, because I think it's a pretty small subsection of it could end up causing such a huge complexity for a relatively small subsection of the use cases.
I mean, I think we have tried to steer. I think we have tried to steer around it before, though, haven't we? I mean, I think this was originally declared out of scope, in fact, for the first sort of half of the booking membership conversation, and then it just was unavoidable as a requirement. So I don't.
Yeah, yeah, exactly that. It's one of those things that this is right at the end of the process now. We've figured everything else out. This is the last problem, and it doesn't seem to want to be solved by ignoring it. Annoyingly, the MCR Active project has actually been significantly delayed to wait for this feature alone on its own by a number of months, which is kind of nuts in some ways. But also, you know, as you say, but also I guess I can see from their perspective, as mentioned, with the user journeys.
But and to simplify it, perhaps the precise examples are necessary. So you spoke to the swimming case there.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to find some very abstract method of catering to that, how do we fix that specific issue for them for this iteration of the spec, which may end up with a breaking change later down the line when we realize, okay, that doesn't cater for this, and therefore CR2 of the membership system is going to have either breaking changes or going to have a whole separate version. So I don't know, but it just seems like in order to get it done, figure out exactly what it is it needs doing.
Yeah. I mean, so part of the issue is that the barcodes in these systems for membership cards are tied to accounts. That's part of the issue, and that seems to be the case across Flow and Gladstone and Legend. You can't get a barcode on a membership card unless you've got an account. You can get a per booking barcode, but the problem with those swimming sessions is the swimming sessions, you're not booking, you're walking in. I mean, admittedly in COVID times, that's not how it works at the moment, but their push is that during half-term swim sessions, that's how you get access. You just swipe or you give your card. So that's the constraint then is, well, you know, how do you do that without an account?
Why? Okay, so the bit I don't understand, I do agree with what Matthew's been saying about that. What's the difference? If this is so complicated to solve, why can't we just solve it with a parent plus one child? Why do we care who the child is? We're putting all this work in to try and work out who the child is. And if it's to solve the I'm taking my child swimming to get around this pre-booking walk-in scenario, why can't we use what's already there with the parent and non-member guest style booking flow?
Yeah, so the use case being that you drop your kid off at the entrance to the leisure centre, they run in with their card and scan and then go swimming. That's not possible if you have to have the parent make.
But if the child's old enough to do that, then surely they should have their own account anyway. And not, why would you bother linking yourself to them?
You mean they need an email address at that point?
Yeah, but I wouldn't let my 2.5-year-old run into the centre with the card. I would go in with her and scan in, and at that point, it doesn't matter if you know what her name is or not.
It's a question for Debbie potentially. I don't know. This is yeah. Why does it matter? I mean, because everyone actually is pretty hot on having these records as individual records and
which we would do in the system. You would have a record, in Debbie's scenario, you would have a non-member record with the name against it, which, as far as I'm aware, the spec itself can already handle.
Yeah, but they need a subscription to get through the entry points, Mark, or they need a booking. And if they're not booking in advance, then they're not going to get through the entry points. The cutoff for this scenario of somebody being allowed to go swimming on their own is going to be 8, because that's the recommended guideline. So we're talking about children that are over 8 that will want to arrive at the centre and allow themselves access to swimming.
How many of those do you think we're going to have that will be signed up through the MCR portal that would make this worthwhile?
I mean, we have very few, but we've only got one site in that whole area, so it's probably more relevant to ask GLL on what those numbers are.
And if I remember correctly, this was that particular age bracket 8 was identified by Anne-Marie as being of particular interest for MCR Active. My recollection was that they viewed a lot of children as operating independently at that age. So I think it's a demographic they're keen to cater for, even if the actual numbers through the turnstiles aren't large right now.
Wow, this is I see this is fast becoming a requirements conversation. We need Anne-Marie back in here and Karine or people to represent that side. But it's a very interesting idea. Can we get away with not? Can we get away without them being a named account? Basically, it sounds like. Can you book a chart? Well, what does that even mean? How do they? What's the process then? So because without pre-booking, we're talking about walk-in. So as a walk-in 4-year-old or as a walk-in 12-year-old, with a walk-in 4-year-old scenario, the argument is the parents there anyway, so they can go to front desk and, well, how does that work? So let's say that. So taking the OpenActive example, let's say I have a child called Johnny. I go to front desk. And I say, can Johnny go swimming? I have an adult account. Is front desk in OpenActive then going to be equipped to just let Johnny in without doing anything else, given that Johnny doesn't exist on the system, except that only my account exists? Or is there a challenge there?
I mean, because they're entitled to free swimming, currently we'd expect them to have their own account, because that own account, we would validate the address, which means that they're entitled to free swimming, because they're not going to be entitled to free swimming if they're live outside of a certain area, are they? Because that's the whole point of it in MCR. So they are going to have their own account with an address on it that's been validated to say that they get free swimming, and it's the subscription that would be assigned to that account that gives them free swimming. From our perspective, like a configuration perspective, we wouldn't just set up a free swimming button that we allow anybody to go through on. If that makes sense, yeah.
This is ringing bells from when we had this can we do a workaround conversation last time. Yeah.
So it feels like where anybody is entitled to something free, and we've had this conversation before about these free usage things, that we should be insisting on an account being created rather than using the non-member, so that we can check everything, so that we understand why they're getting it for free.
So it seems like this operation, it comes down to the way to work around this is to have a button that says access swimming for free that you can just press when you see a kid, and that's all fine. And it sounds like operationally that's not something that is desirable to have, and therefore we have the problem that we have.
Isn't it possible to validate all that address information on the parent account? As in, it's the parent coming in with the 4-year-old sort of out here and saying, my 4-year-old is eligible to free swimming because I'm in the MCR active, in the MCR region. Does the child have to have the address on their account as well?
Currently, my understanding is that's what they do. Yeah, that's what we'd expect them to do.
So shall we? I mean, I guess maybe to should we try going back to the solutions just to see if one of these is doable given the constraints? It sounds like there might be operationally, and then if it sounds like both of these are like totally out there, can't be done, then maybe we look to push back and see if that button can be introduced at front desk, as we mentioned, to just let people in. Things which sounds like a slightly different conversation. Does that work? Debbie, I can't see you're nodding or not, but does that work for you?
Yeah, I'm not keen on suggesting a button at front of house. There's something that we've avoided all this time. It shouldn't be introduced just because OpenActive is there. I'm I'm not
Yep.
keen on that suggestion at all, if I'm honest. Though we would have been doing it a certain way for all of this time for a reason, but it needs operational conversation.
Mhm. Okay, so just going back to the so you scroll up into that diagram just to kind of I've added that to the top of this. So the two options that we talked about before, I've just drawn them so that it might create a little bit of clarity there. The blue arrow is the access key, is the authentication. That's an OAuth flow when you get prompted for username and password, or it's in the bottom case, it's a direct creation, which you're doing without the username and password. So in the first, and I'll just change the color to make that clearer. So in the first case, you're basically getting access through the parent to the child, and that's how the broker is accessing that child's information. If in the future they decide to break off and become their own parent, their own entity, and obviously they'll have an email address to authenticate with. But that's the kind of setup there. And the second option is that they actually exist totally separately from each other, and there's no link between the parent and the child in the booking system that's created, at least not from an OpenActive perspective. It might exist separately, and that child is only available to the broker, to that one broker, because the broker creates the child and the broker deletes the child if they're no longer required.
When you say deletes a child, you're deleting a record from a broker system, but are you checking whether that record's been shared with the booking system?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that would be a delete. That would be the broker in the right hand case. The broker record that it creates, or maybe marking it as deleted. Maybe it's a soft delete and all the personal data is deleted, but the contents of the record remains for billing reasons, if there's a need for that on the booking system side.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to just delete a record that's got history associated to it. We can't do that.
Yeah, so maybe it's a
purge rather than a delete, but that just anonymizes the record essentially. But I guess
right.
So if the customer's being given the option to remove a child account for some reason from the broker system, at the point that they say are agreeing to it being removed from the broker system, are we also going to tell them that that'll remove them from the booking system, or are we going to tell them that they
in the
need
right
to do
hand
that
case?
separately?
Yes. In option 2, yes, on the right hand side, we would tell them that. Option 1, no, the account remains in the booking system because they created that, and they need to go into the booking system and delete that information. Is there a preference there?
Well,
It's yeah, I can see. I think.
Oh, sorry, I've lost audio. Is that true for others?
Yeah.
I keep losing Nick. I don't know if anybody else does. I'm getting sort of half a sentence.
Oh really? Oh no.
Yeah, sorry, we just lost you for the last 30 seconds or so, which I gather were an important 30 seconds, but.
Oh, that's rubbish. Sorry about that. I'm having all sorts of issues here apparently. What can I do?
So we're giving a customer the option to remove an account that is their own account only, or accounts that are dependents to them as well.
In the right hand side, in the second of these options, it's the we would just give them permission to delete the child's account, not their own account.
You mean the parent could choose to delete their own account, or the child could choose to delete their own account? It's the logged in person that's choosing to delete an account.
The logged in person is choosing to delete the kid's account only on the basis that that account doesn't exist for any other reason than just being there for the broker. I mean, so maybe should I maybe explain the difference between these two again, because it's probably not very clear, and I don't know if this diagram's actually helping between the two different sides.
I'm reading the diagram on the left with the arrow pointing down as being the parents created a record and then created a dependent record for the child. I'm reading the one on the right as being each record has been created separately, and there's no association between the two.
That's correct, yeah.
So the one on the right, what you've just said doesn't make sense, because if there's no association between the two, how can I decide that a child's record that's not associated to me can be deleted?
So the green arrow represents the broker managing the record, and the blue arrow represents the customer themselves managing the record. So in the blue arrow, the customer manages their own record. That comes from the blue arrow is the broker, the customer who's logged into the broker accessing their own record, the parent record. And in the first case on the left hand side, you access your own record and then you create a child connected to that record. In the second case, you access your own record, but then separately the broker can create a child that's only used by the broker. So it's not linked to the parent, and it wouldn't exist otherwise.
I don't know, I'm running out of thoughts.
Yeah, I feel like we've been sort of slightly going in circles. There's a part of me that wants to throw up my hands and cheat a little bit at this, in that gyms are not the only service MCR Active, enterprises similar to MCR Active attempt to link up, right? So we get things like libraries and so on running into exactly the same issues. And I'm wondering how this gets solved in other domains, and if there's a pattern or an architecture we can borrow from there. I'm also aware that that could just be going down another rabbit hole and they're hitting the same issues and having the same conversations. But I feel like we've got option A and option B, and neither of them seem particularly workable.
Well, I mean, option A is the one that I'd gone into more detail enumerating, and option A is where, I mean, it is doable. I mean, the API endpoints aren't crazy to do it. Yeah, it's just a little bit of complication for the user really to deal with when they have to link their account and figure out, whether, and that duplicate record issue that we talked about. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can definitely go away and do some more research on this and try and see if there's any other approaches to it. I think you're right, that's deferring the issue rather than solving it. But yeah, unless yeah, well, before we do that, shall I just talk through, if you scroll down, shall I just talk through how the first one would look in case that gives anyone any inspiration?
Sure. So this is this.
Yeah, this is this exactly this black thing. And so if you scroll down to where my cursor is, there we go. Okay, so this is how it looks. It's a post endpoint. You post customer record, so you can see there if you scroll down a little further. So just to that JSON blob, yeah. So you post the customer record with all the detail of the child in there. Probably won't be an email address, right, because it's a kid. But that there are all the fields. But just for illustration, take that out. And if you scroll up a little, then there's a managed by. and this managed by is basically saying that the broker is saying that I want to create a child account and I want that account to be a child of this parent account, and that's it. You create the account as a child of the parent. You have to make this call authenticated as the parent. So when you're authenticated as a parent, you're creating a child of the parent, and then you can see this here account. And then if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see there's a corresponding delete call because you've created it. Scroll down a little bit further. There you go. You can also delete it, assuming that no one's logged in, and it sounds like it's a purge in some systems, as Debbie mentions, rather than a delete. And so you basically just create the child. The child exists, and you can add barcodes to them and whatever else you need to do, and then you delete the child when you don't need them anymore for any reason. I mean, you just undo the action if you want to do it. So that's the two endpoints, and then there's one further change. If you click on my face there, Tim, at the top, oh, if you can see it, why can't you? Oh, you've minimized it.
So it's behind the. Oh, there we go. Hold on.
I think it's full screen, isn't it? There you go. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, there's this other addition here, which is basically a managed and managers and managed by for the customer account. So within the parent account, you have this manages set up, which is basically the children of that account enumerated. So when you connect a new account, when you go to authentication, you connect somebody. If little Johnny is present, you'll see them in this array. You can then query for that detail as you usually would for any other customer to get the name, etc., or whatever you need, the details from that account. And so it's just a very simple parent-child relationship, and then you can make bookings on behalf of the child as you would with well, everything else is the same. All that we've done is just we've done that's different from everything else is we've created the record under the parent, if you like, and so it's just a way of doing that within the account, and then obviously those OAuth permissions say and will also give you access to edit and update the dependent accounts. How does that look to people, and does that help?
Seems to make sense to me. I imagine managed by and managers are mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess Matt, Mark, Phil, other devs on the call, any thoughts on?
So the identifiers here are booking system identifiers or broker identifiers?
Booking system. So these are all created with reference to the booking system. They're not. There's no broker identifiers that the booking system's aware of.
Cool. Yep.
Mark, Phil, don't know if Mark, you had lots of high-level questions at the beginning, but then I don't know if we've killed you with detail or, or what's going on.
The actual booking API, I'll probably filter comment on if it's that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think I asked most of the stuff earlier. I still have some concerns. I'm in agreement with Matthew on the is it useful. My biggest concern about this whole thing is it's being built for MCR. This is not an OpenActive spec. If it was an open spec, we wouldn't bother with this until everybody's implemented phase 1. We haven't even started development on phase one. So we don't even know if there's any problems with that. So that's my biggest concern with this whole process at the moment. I don't know how much we can iron out of all of the details on a endpoint that I can't work out how the ins and outs of syncing data and child's data going back and forth, duplication of data, GDPR preferences, consent to make bookings. You know, where does all that sit at the moment? And at the moment, it only appears to be MCR that really care about this stuff. I don't know, bit blunt, I know, but
well, to be fair, go on, Tim.
I was just going to say, I mean, from the perspective of OpenActive standards, yeah, I mean, I would see this as, you know, this is all optional. It will be an OpenActive standard. I think probably a community maintained standard, with the idea that stakeholders like MCR Active would be contributing more to it, and it would be managed more by those kinds of stakeholders than by the central initiative, but it would still very much be an OpenActive standard. I'm not too sure where your concern lies exactly.
It's a lot of complexity to put in to something that's not going to be used very much.
Okay, so it's.
I'm trying. What I'm trying to weigh out is investment. Is the investment? You know, everyone active are asking, are going to be funding a lot of this. They're going to be paying a lot of money for a lot of development time for something that, to be perfectly honest, in my opinion, will never be used. But yeah, that's just my opinion. There's no data behind it whatsoever. But
I was going to say, Mark, it might be worth sharing some of the. I mean, I don't know if you may have already heard this, but obviously Westminster and Manchester are two of the first of these projects that are running. But then there's also interest from not only eventually there'll be others in London, but other Manchester areas in Greater Manchester are also interested in following on. I know some of those are Gladstone. Some of them are.
Would it not be better? Most projects like this, now, you know, we're talking about an open API here. Most projects, when you're developing something like this, you develop the first phase and you see the impact of it. You get the data back. You see, okay, what the problems are. What are people asking to do? What we're trying to do here is predict 3 phases ahead of time of what people use MCR for. We don't even know if people are even going to use the MCR portal. I'm sure they will. I'm sure there's a user case for it, but we just don't know. There's no data there. We're guessing at the moment.
And maybe there was other calls where I've said this before, but I'll say it again for the record. I've pushed back on this spec existing for over 18 months. You know, it's saying, can we not just go live with phase 1 first and try that? You know, I absolutely agree with you. You know, there's definitely an advantage to phasing. And we really pushed back on until whenever this came to maybe this was August or something, when we actually got around to eventually saying, fine, okay, let's add it to the scope. It seems like there's enough people that have said we want this, Manchester and Westminster being two of the louder voices, but there are a number of organisations that were on the original proposal that said, yes, this is something we want. So, you know, having that as a thing. Yeah, I agree, ideally, but then I suppose the other part is that everyone active, who's, as you mentioned, putting a lot of the funding in, have also been one of the big voices in the room for this spec existing. Everyone active pushing for this specifically, and Dave's view on this being that we should do it all, and you know, phase 1, 2, and 3 should be, you know, the whole plan should be in place. We shouldn't just be doing phase 1 and hoping for the best. And everyone active specifically pushing back against that as one of the biggest proponents of it.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
I totally agree, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just concerned that this whole thing is holding up getting phase 1 done. You know, I can't see what's stopping us from doing phase 1. I don't. Yeah, it's coming from previous things. I don't like pre-committing to, if we get around to this in a year's time, we're going to completely forgotten how the whole thing works. We're going to have tested phase 1 and changed the spec 3 or 4 times by that point, which may have changed all of this. So we're really going round and round in circles, trying to fix an endpoint ahead of time which could possibly change after phase 1 is released?
So I suppose there's another bit of detail here that might be interesting, is that there's a few implementations happening in parallel. So Flow and Legend also in parallel. Legend's done everything except this piece. They haven't done the dependent accounts bit. And so there's a kind of push to create certainty for this spec so that everyone can estimate it, cost it, figure out what's what.
Would Legend be willing to provide the data of usage, how much usage they're actually getting through these endpoints to?
Well,
if they've already done it, then surely.
Yeah, the complexity would. Well, this is where we're in conversations with them about that at the moment, actually. But the complexity with Legend is that the work was primarily done for a GLL, and you might be aware that the GLL contract changed. So that's now Flow rather than Legend that are running that. So unfortunately, yeah, that happened just before it was about to go live, which is a real shame. But there are others obviously that use Legend, and that's what the conversation is now, to get them to turn that on and see what happens as a result of that. But obviously the key thing is that because of MCR and Westminster being obviously large opportunities and use cases, and then requiring this to go ahead and go live and show evidence, it's kind of a bit of a yeah, I mean, we're basically doing what we're being asked to do here, I suppose, by the stakeholders that are interested in moving this all forward. So
I think
maybe
Nick, that's the problem. That's the problem we have as a business. Is, you know, as we've said before, we're committed to supporting this, but at the moment, because there is no defined, you know, it's not fully scopable almost. It's become a bespoke project, so we can't treat it in anything other than it being a bespoke project just for, in this case, Westminster.
Well, so we've got here is I think this is the last of the requirements that have gone in, and this is the very end of the tail end of the conversations to get this into a proposal that people can start kind of cracking on with. So hopefully we're not. I know that some of the thoughts earlier that were shared in previous meetings at a high level were, you know, is this an unending scope creep that's never going to end? Where's the end of it? And I absolutely I feel that more acutely, well, as acutely as everyone else, I'm sure. But I think this is it. I don't believe there's any more from anyone that's been mentioned, you know, in terms of additional requirements, and these requirements themselves haven't changed since, you know, whenever the projects were first announced. It's just that the business requirements haven't changed. What's changed is the willingness of Everyone Active and others to have guest accounts used for everything. And I think the pushback on guest accounts being used for everything is really what's driven this. And that unfortunately is Everyone Active. And I mean, look, if we did try and persuade Everyone Active to go with a guest only approach, I don't know if Debbie, you want to chime in here, because I think that's probably what's driving this whole thing.
No, I don't want to chime in at the moment, Nick. No.
So yeah, I'll just step in and say, I mean, I get exposed to stakeholder conversations at a different level and through different channels, but you know, I feel like the messaging I got very strongly early on back in August, as Nick was saying, was people couldn't believe that this was missing from the specification, that this was core kind of business logic across a lot of different systems, and that the failure to include it in the original booking spec was a huge error. And so the appetite was very clear for the membership proposal as a whole to go ahead. And then we had quite a few scope discussions about whether or not this particular tranche of work should be in scope. And there was a lot of pushback against that. And then finally, you know, it was decided that indeed this was in scope and this was something that was needed. And I think really having a bit of perspective on it, as Nick said, this is like last mile, hardest mile, but we've gone through, this started off as like, I think it was a 40-page document when we started, and we have gone through every page in a lot of detail. And this is the niggling, incredibly annoying bit that's left. So, and I know that it's annoying, and I know that it's irritating, but it's also, in terms of the percentage of the whole, you know, we're really talking about 5%, you know. So I think if we can hash out some kind of solution, or at least eliminate avenues that aren't promising, I think we've made actually huge progress. And I don't want to sort of press the eject button this close to the finish line over what I think is really actually a resolvable issue. We can have all of the scope conversations again, but I don't think we're going to arrive at a different conclusion.
I think that what's missing from my understanding is kind of, so Nick's got two options here. It would be really useful to see kind of specific use cases that solve the issues, how each of the options solves the issues that are or the use cases that are absolutely required by Westminster or MCR Active, because then we can actually kind of play around with them and go, okay, yes, that works for swimming. Now Johnny can get dropped off at the door. He's 8 years old. He goes in, bang, and there's no problem with GDPR because the data doesn't flow that way. Happy days. Or okay, Johnny gets dropped off, but there's a GDPR leak there. How do we solve? Without having the kind of map from how it works specifically in each use case, where the broker's creating the child, or where the child already exists and they're linking it, etc. It's quite difficult to fully figure out what the implications are. But obviously, Nick's already spent quite a lot of time thinking about this, and that's a whole nother level of work to say, go ahead and do that, please, Nick. And I know that that's therefore a lot to ask when we're trying to kind of get it done. But that I think that would make it easier to actually reason about the potential solutions.
Yeah, I think maybe part of the problem is actually that this is, not actually trying to do this live is just really, really hard. That thinking, oh, what are the GDPR implications of this is not a question that you can kind of freestyle on a call. And it's dangerous to do it. So yeah, maybe it is about actually getting this proposal written up more formally in a forum that everybody can see, like GitHub, connected to actual use cases, as you said, Matt, with MCR Active and Active Westminster, saying, okay, here's what this is actually solving, and here's why it's important to us. Because I'm firmly convinced that it is quite key to those projects, but that actually hasn't been widely shared. So if we can get this in a more tractable form for the devs on the call to look at, I guess maybe that's really the next step, rather than going around the houses, on a call trying to unpick it.
Yep, I agree. Yep.
Okay. Does that make sense to others on the call? I'm kind of tempted to just close the call here and say we're not going to actually get further on this issue right now, and we just go away, get this written up properly, and then we can have a consultation exercise. I think I'm getting a nod from Andrew there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay.
I have actually got there are two other things we could agree on, but I mean, we might all be banjaxed by this to want to just push that to next time. But I've made the changes for the atomic customer update endpoint in the doc as well. But yeah, maybe we just pick that up next time. So I'm very happy to pick up the work and make the additional issue as discussed. I think. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, without wanting to, reopening larger conversations, but I mean, Mark and Andrew, obviously, I do sense a tension there around obviously what the higher level stuff, and I know that you guys haven't been in this series of meetings, of which this is one of the last ones, and so you're coming in kind of a little bit away from that detail, but. Making sure that obviously, as mentioned, obviously there's a lot of time going into this, so we want to make sure that's worthwhile happening, and if there's hours and hours going into getting agreements, and we want to make sure that's not then we want to make sure that's useful for everybody that's involved, really. So I mean, from your perspective, do you think, I mean, are you happy to kind of get behind this and the last bits of this? I mean, maybe it's Andrew, because I know you're in the other conversations with respect to phase 1, 2, and 3, and what's going on with the Westminster conversations. It sounded like what the last call that we were all on together, Andrew, that they wanted to have indicative pricing for phase 3 as part of those conversations, which would need this to be bottomed out to deliver that for them. So is it worth us finishing this off, basically, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, speaking openly and honestly, the issues we've got at the moment is, you can see we're committing to putting people on these calls to make sure that we fit in. We've got to ensure that this meets, this forms part of where we're going as a business as well, but also to protect the interests of everyone active. We're not getting much feedback from any other customers at the moment to drive this forward. So that's something which we have to then use as a balance. But I think where I get constantly questioned is what is the spec, and where are we going to ensure that this falls in line with our product suite. And at the moment, it is just having to be looked at as an individual bespoke project because it is just one customer that's looking at this.
But sorry to answer the question directly, but from your perspective, it's worth us, even if it's a bespoke project within the context of Gladstone right now, it's still worth us pursuing within the context of that bespoke project this to its conclusion from your perspective.
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. That's good to know.
Hopefully Andrew, don't forget these calls are recorded, so he's got you now. He talks.
Yeah, I know.
No. I mean, what I'm just checking is that we don't. I think we all know that there's only a small number of early adopters in any ecosystem. In this ecosystem, that is Everyone Active, GLL, and a few others. And so, from a leisure operator perspective, obviously there's lots of other booking systems that serve other needs. I would completely expect it to appear as a bespoke project at this early stage in ecosystem development anyway, because no one's seen this proven out and working. Obviously, we can imagine that should it work well with Manchester and Westminster, then there we are. There's a whole world of interest there, and it's not just Westminster and Manchester, obviously, as potential brokers. There's lots of others that are in the queue to get involved and connect into this that we might see use cases come from. So you're really hopeful that it's just the reason that Westminster and Manchester are of interest specifically is because they're the ones that are pushing this from a contract perspective. It doesn't mean they're the only ones that will obviously use the data and create the use cases and create the value for everyone in the chain. So it's there'll be a rebalancing, I imagine, of stakeholders engaged as this progresses.
I think we also have to be very careful with the type of customers that we're dealing with and the contacts at those customers, that they do appreciate that this is going to be a rocky road. They are early adopters. They are very, very early adopters. So we have to be very careful and their expectations are met as well.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
Okay, I think let's call a halt to it there. I think, the action is clearly, let's get this communicated in a way we can, everyone can feed back on usefully. We've agreed that feeding back is a good exercise to do. So let's just expedite that so that we can get people with a spec and people can start implementing. And of course, that is, as Andrew alluded, that's a whole different world of possible issues and so on. But let's get to that point first. Okay, thank you very much for joining. I'll ping everybody who's normally invited to this meeting, plus everybody who's on this call, once we've got something for them to look at, and then we can start moving forward with more considered opinions next call. Okay, thanks very much all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.